Gee, I wish I was back in the Navy. The Navy was the place I wanted to be. Introducing Elaine Trovillion.
We are calling all women, calling all women.
Please join the waves, join the waves.
Company 104, 44 Battalion 1, USN Hospital Corps School, Bethesda, Maryland. U.S. Navy Hospital, San Diego, California, 1947. San Diego, California, World War II photo, 1948. San Diego, California Waves Quarters, United States Naval Hospital, January 1st, 1947. Greg Nowicki Jr., U.S. Army, Elaine's husband. What made you decide to go in the Navy?
They let women in. Hi, my name is Elaine Trovillion. I was born in 1924, and as of right now, I'm 93 years old. I served in the Navy as a wave during World War II, and here is my story. I was one of the first girls to go into the service because we weren't allowed in the service before. And we had to be 20 years old to get in if you were a woman. So I was 3 months too little to be in yet, so I had to wait. And then the day I was to go, I had turned 20. I went down Chicago to the recruiting station, and they hadn't opened the doors yet. I was so excited, and they hadn't opened the doors yet, and there was some sailors coming down the hall, and they said, "Boy, you must be anxious to go in the Navy." And I said, "I am anxious. I've been waiting for 3 months." So anyways, they opened the door, and I walked in. They gave me a piece of paper, and they said, "Fill this out." Well, it was just a normie piece of paper, your name, your address, schooling, and this and that and this and that. And then they said, "Now take this to the next office down, that there's a doctor in there, and he'll check you to see if you're able to, go into the Navy." So I went to the next wheel down, and the doctor looked at my ears, my nose, my heart, like they do blood pressure. And he said, "Well, you're in fine condition." So he said, "Okay, go to the next room down the hall." And I said, "Okay." So I went down there, and there was some lieutenants in the Navy and some regular sailors, and there was also 4 or 5 young guys about 17 years old who were probably joining the service too, because you could be younger if you were a man. So anyways, they told us to raise our hand. So we all got in line and we raised our hand, and then we said, I will do this, I will, the same old thing. And after they got through, the lieutenant said, "Well, you can put your hand down now." We all put our hand down, and he says, "You are now in the United States Navy." We all we looked at each other, me and these young guys, and one of the guys said, "What did he say?" And I said, "He said we're in the United States Navy." And so that was my best day of my life, I think. So I went home and told my mother and dad were drinking coffee at the kitchen table. It was still early in the morning, and I was standing there looking at them, and my mother said, "What is the matter with you, Billy?" My nickname was Billy, by the way. And I I says, Mom, Dad, I think I just joined the Navy. Well, they told me that in about a week and a half, I would get a letter from the Navy Department, and they would tell me, what to do then. So I did. I got a letter about a week and a half later, and it says I was to go on a certain day at 7:30 to the Grand Central Station in Chicago, a train station, and wait and just take one change of clothing and a few personal items. And apparently they had a car from the train that they were going to use for transporting. So I went down there. There was me and two other women, I think, or three other women. I can't remember exactly. I was so excited. And a bunch of guys, that were going in. Well, then they said they want to volunteer for somebody to stand guard duty at each end of the train, so that nobody could get in when we were all in there. And they said, and the volunteer is Elaine Trovillion. So I learned early that you don't volunteer, they volunteer you. But the first night in the Navy, I was on guard duty. Well, when we got on the train and we headed there, we were there all night on the train. And when we got to New York, there was two big Navy buses waiting there, one for the women and one for the men, because we were going to different boot camps, basic training. Well, when we got on the bus, they took us out to Hunter College, New York, which was a big women's college. It was 4 or 5 big buildings that were involved in it. And that was going to be our boot camp, our basic training. So it was really, they didn't know what to do with us for boot camp. Nowadays, the women do what the men do, but in that we were new, and we were cute little girls. We didn't curl around on our bellies like the men did. So we paraded a lot around the reservoir that they have on the base, and we walked around that and marched and marched and marched. And it was so cold at the time that if a tear would leave our eye, it would freeze before it. So we marched and marched and marched around the reservoir, and then once in a while we go over to the auditorium. And in this college, they had a big desk stage, and chairs upstairs. And we would go upstairs, and they would show us shadows of airplanes that were enemies and ours, and ships that were enemies and ours. And we were supposed to be able to see just by the shadow who it belonged to. Well, none of us could do it. They all looked alike to us, so that was kind of. And then we had a Marine come in, and twice a week he came in for exercise to show us how to protect ourselves. And he was supposed to be showing us how to throw people over our shoulders. That was funny too, because not one of us showed anybody over our shoulders. And we still marched. And then one day we were coming down from seeing the images of all these things, and I stumbled on the stairs and I sprained my ankle. And I thought, oh boy, oh boy. So they took me over to the medic, and he looked at it and he wrapped it up good, and gave me a pair of crutches. And I thought, wow, no more walking around the reservoir, And they made me walk alongside them while they were marching with my crutches. And that's hard because I never could use crutches very, very well. Well, we finally finished that, and then we were told that they would, on the bulletin board, put our name and where we were being transferred to after our boot camp, after our boot camp was over. So I had put down, when they ask you what 3 things would you like to do in the Navy, and I had put down flying because I had formerly flown when I learned how to fly when I was 16. I put down flying, and if that didn't work, I'd say aviation mechanic. If that didn't work, then I said link night trainer, which was a great big thing that the guys got in that were learning how to fly, you know. And I didn't get any of them. And it was said I was sent to corps school to become a corpsman, a medic, same as they call them medics nowadays, and then we call them corpsmen. And the corpsman was at Bethesda, Maryland Navy Hospital. Well, that hospital, if you remember right, is for the president's family, senators, famous people, you know, in the hospital if they got sick. So they didn't want amateurs that didn't know what they were doing working on them. So they wouldn't even let us go into the hospital to learn anything, you know, on the people. But they had a Quonset hut put up behind the hospital. And that's where we took our training to be a corpsman. And we practiced on each other. I still got the scars to prove it. It was quite a thing. Well, then finally we finished and we got our diploma for corps school. And then I was sent to Bethesda, Maryland, to a Navy hospital out there. And that was the oldest Navy hospital in the country. It was built, I think, in 1880 something. And it was really a huge place, and it had hundreds of acres around it. And it was a beautiful hospital, though. I loved it there. And so I worked there on the wards for a while. And there was three. It was like a big front rod, you know, and then 3 wards going off from it. So that, and right in the middle, they had an iron lung. That was, remember when the polio was predominant, like, yeah. Well, we had a young sailor that had come into the Navy, and he had been in the Navy only a short time, a few months or something, and he came down with polio. So they got an iron lung, and they put him in an iron lung. Instead of putting him in a room where nobody could see him, you know, they put him right in the middle. So anybody that come out of those 3 wards, you know, could see him. And I think his name was Jimmy. And they could say, "Hi, Jimmy, how you doing today?" And he could look up in his mirror and see who was talking to him, you know, because his whole body was in the iron lung, except for his head. And I often wondered what happened to him. Well, then they decided that they were going to make me a medical assistant in surgery. And so one of my parts of training was to help with autopsies in the morning in the hospital. You know, when everybody that died in the hospital had to have an autopsy in the morning, and the doctor would come in and do it. And anyways, so I was sent over there, and they had me on night duty, you know, in case a body come in during the night. And it was scary. You gotta remember, I wasn't too old. I was very young yet. And I don't think I'd ever seen a dead body. So anyways, it was kind of scary. And I used to call up everybody I knew that was on night duty, you know, and talk to them just to have somebody to talk to. I didn't know much about dead bodies or anything. And one time they brought a body over in the middle of the night. It was they laid it on a slab table, you know, and covered it over with a sheet, like I did for the doctor. He come in at about 5:30 in the morning for autopsies. And all of a sudden, this sheet went up and the body went up. It was sitting, and I thought, oh my God, he's still alive. And I called over to the hospital and I said, the patient you just brought over to the autopsy room is still alive. And the doctor come running over and looked, and then when he got there, he looked at me and he said, "You're new here, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't." He started laughing. He says, "He's not alive." I said, "What do you mean?" He sat up. He said, "That's his reflexes. Don't worry about it." A lot of times they'd set up her. So anyways, I felt a little better. Anyways, the next morning now, we had the autopsies, and I learned how to handle, knives and things. So that was a little big. While I was stationed in Washington, D.C., we were, the Navy Department had become so crowded that they didn't have any room, so they bought a big factory on the other side of the town, and that's where my duty was. We had when a ship went out, if the ship got sunk or torpedoed or something, we would hear about it there, and we'd have to figure out how many men were aboard it, and if anyone got killed or if the whole troop went down with it, or whatever. That was kind of rough. Oh, and then something kind of weary happened. Funny, I mean. um, While we were there, a Marine came back from the overseas. He was a hero. He had medals and everything. And he was a hero, and he came back after serving. And he went out with this madam of the street, we all presume was, and he went up into the balcony. They used to, in those days, they used to have a balcony in movie picture shows, and you could rent a couch up there instead of for a little extra money. Well, he had taken a girl up there, and for some reason, he killed her. He choked her to death, and she got killed. Well, he went on trial for murder, and right down the street and around the corner from us was the prison, and this was the prison where he was at. And when we'd go by there coming into work in the morning, we'd have to go by the little road that went into the prison, and there was always women in there crying and rolling on the ground because he was so handsome, and he was being charged with murder and everything. Well, they found him guilty, and they sentenced him to electric chair. And in those days, you weren't said you're guilty and you had 2 years or 20 years to live for. Then, in those days, you were found guilty, you were killed. That's it. And he was sentenced to electric chair. And all these women there, we go by, and the women be sitting there crying, on the ground, because this guy was really cute. And he was a hero on top of it. And one day we come into work, and their yard in front of the prison was just loaded with women, and they were sitting on the ground and crying and everything, and had signs, no, 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 don't do it, and everything. And we didn't know what was happening. But we went on to the factory where we worked, and we were there about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and all of a sudden, our lights went real dim. And then they came back on again. And then a few minutes later, they got real dim again. And then they came back on again. They had electrocuted this Marine. And when we got back that night, it was horrible. There must have been 50 women in there in front of the prison screaming and yelling and everything. So that was an exciting day. Anyways, that was one of the things that happened there. And then we had to, like I said, if a ship went down, we had to say how many crew was on it. Was any crew saved? Did all the crew to go down with it? Who was their families? What was their names? What was their family's name? Where was he from? And this and that. Well, we didn't have too many ships, so we weren't too busy. I think that's why they finally closed this factory down and didn't use it for that anymore. And it was kind of icky, You don't like to read about 2,000 men.
What about that one ship? The one ship that you had to go in?
Huh?
The one ship where there were dead bodies of the men.
Oh, well, that was a ship during the Battle of Midway, which was a very bad battle. We lost two carriers there, and everything. Well, this one ship, a destroyer, it was torpedoed in the front, in the bow of the ship, which is the front of the ship, and that's where all the guys slept when they were off duty, on hammocks in there. And it went in there and it caught that whole section on fire, and it was quite horrible, I guess. And then they closed that section up, and they fixed the doors so nobody could get in and put, and they told all the people, the guys that were on the ship, that the guys that were up there were wounded and were put in Pearl Harbor at the Navy Hospital in Pearl Harbor, which was not true. And they went all the way from the Pacific Ocean, where Midway was, all the way down South America, all the way to the canal, where the boats go through. Yeah, and took it up, and then took it all the way up to the East Coast, to the Norfolk Navy Yards, where it was going to be repaired, But the crew that was on it didn't realize that their crew members were still on there. They thought they had been taken off in Pearl Harbor and put in the hospital, and they didn't know what had happened. And anyways, we had to go over at midnight, and they give us something covering us. I don't know, I felt like I was going under deep sea diving or something. We had to wear one of those to go in there and bring these bodies out. There was approximately 50-something, 54 or something like that, sailors that had been caught in there in the fire and was killed. And we had to bring those bodies out. And they had been going 3 months, I think it was, to get it around the the canal, and to get it across to the Atlantic Ocean. And it was pretty gruesome. We only had to do one night, and then they'd have another bunch of crews come in, and the smell was very bad, because they all burned to death, it was very bad. I did pick up a wedding ring on the floor and stuck it in a pocket of the thing. I still have it I had it until somebody stole it. And I was hoping it had a name inside so I could, find out what his wife's name was or something, and return but there was nothing inside, so I just held on to it. But that was very, very sad. And then when that ship was finally fixed up, a new front put in, new bow put in, and everything, and it went out to sea again. It went down the St. Lawrence Freeway, waterway, I should say, and out to the ocean. And it had just got into the ocean, not too far, and it was torpedoed and sunk again. Only this time it was sunk all the way down. So it was really a sad, sad story. But it was very unpleasant bringing those bodies out. And we were warned we were not to ever mention it, ever, ever, ever again. And if we were we'd be in a lot of trouble if we were. Well, I went 80 years not mentioning it. And then I finally did a couple of years ago, because I seen somebody, an old man, and he had a hat on like me, World War II. So I knew he was, had been on a ship, and it said U.S. Honolulu, and that was the name of the ship that I remembered. And I asked him if he had been on and he said, yeah. And I said, where do you want it when she was torpedoed at Midway? And he said, yeah, he was on it there. And and then we were talking, and they did not know, the crew did not know that the bodies were still on the ship. They thought they had all been taken out at Pearl Harbor before they even started back. So he was horrified when he found out all the bodies had been on. But that was really sad. But you know, I never mentioned it all years and years and years and years. Never mentioned it. You get scared when you ever mention it again. You had it. And, yeah. My brother, who was 17 years old, my mother signed for him to get into the Marine Corps. And I don't know if you knew it, but the Marine Corps is part of the Navy. It's a big part of the Navy. They don't have their own medics. They have to use corpsman medics. So when the Marines would land on the islands, to fight, they'd have a Navy corpsman with them. And they just made a mistake in the beginning. They send the corpsmen in their uniforms with the Red Cross, Well, the enemy was shooting them all because they didn't want them to fix the guys up that had been shot, And it was horrible. Finally, they wised up and they put a Marine Corps uniform on them when they went into battle. But they go right into battle on the islands with the Marines and Navy corpsmen did. And they were wonderful. So many of them got killed. But I am very proud of what the corpsmen did in World War II. They were wonderful. So anyways, my brother was 17. And my mother had to sign for him to go in. So that was why she was so excited and so nervous when I went in the service. She thought I was going to be killed. We were both going to be killed, But anyways, my brother landed at Peleliu when he was 17. And he fought through the Battle of Peleliu, which was a bad battle. A lot of Marines were killed in that. And then a few months later, the Battle at Okinawa came up. And my brother turned 18. That was his birthday when that was going on. And when they went back for just to rest for a while, then they were kidding my brother. Now he was 18. He was old enough to have a beer. Here he'd been through 3 battles already: Pala Islands, Peleliu, and Okinawa. And he was only 17. And he wrote me nearly every day. Every day. When he'd write me something about a battle he had been in, he said, well, we had an active day yesterday. But he wasn't allowed to say they had a battle. We had an active day yesterday. Or, boy, we were busy yesterday, And I love my brother very much. And
What was his name?
Carlos.
Carlos Trevillion?
Yeah, he was always called Small. When they come in at 5 o'clock, the doctor would come in and do an autopsy, and we'd have to help with the autopsy, which was not a pleasant thing. I hate to see those young guys, because so many of the guys in the service were young. I mean, 18 to 21, it was a good age. Anyways, then they shipped me out to Washington, D.C. And when we got to Washington, D.C., Washington had always had so many servicemen in Washington working, in the Navy Department and everything. But they didn't have any barracks for women. So they didn't. When we came, all these women came all of a sudden to Washington, D.C. there was no place for us to go. So they had sent us across the Potomac River into Arlington, Virginia. And in Arlington, Virginia, there was, right at the entrances, there was 2 apartment buildings, 3 stories high each. There were apartment buildings, people living in. Well, the Navy, I don't know how they got rid of all the people, but they did. And they took over those 3 apartment buildings and made barracks for service women that were coming to Washington, D.C. See, there was Army coming in too, but us. So anyways, we stayed there, and that was interesting. We used to go to the cemetery when we were bored, and that was before Arlington Cemetery was a big cemetery. It was still a military cemetery, but it was big, that was many years ago. And we'd go over there and we'd walk around and look at the graves and everything. And then when we remembered that the tomb of the unknown soldier was there, and they had the guys marching. Well, there was one marching back and forth, and So we sat down in this thing and we done our darndest to make the guys look at us, and we'd watch them, and kid around with them and wink at them and everything. And I swear to God, they never once looked our way. I don't think they even knew how gorgeous we really were. So that was keep us from being bored. And well, when I was in Washington, it was quite exciting, though.
When you were in the military, like and since you took care of a lot of men that were injured, were the ones that had post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety?
Yeah, well, that was in some of them, yeah. But we didn't see that much. We were taught when we were in training to be a medic, that we were not to show any sympathy whatsoever to any of the guys, So if a guy come into the ward, and his legs had both been shot off or something, we weren't supposed to say, "Oh, you poor guy, I feel sorry for you." We'd say, "Boy, you're going to be the biggest talk in town when you go home." We would say things or do things that, and
to keep their spirits up.
Yeah, and they would dance with each other. I don't know how they did it with one leg, but some of them did. They get up there and one time they were very nervous at times. The Marines were, because when they were in the islands fighting, they had to hide at night to kind of rest, and so they always were on the alert.
Especially when they were sleeping at night.
We still had a lot of them that were really alert.
Mm-hmm.
So one time I was taking care of this ward. We had 41 patients on the ward, and there was 2 corpsmen taking care of them. Well, I was taking care of these 3 corpsmen. These 3 guys, and they were, real jittery. And I said, "Well, come on, I have an idea. Let's do something." So I took them. One of them was in a wheelchair, and the other could walk. And we went into the man's bathroom. The head, as the Navy knows the head. We went in there, and we were sitting. Well, we were all sitting on the floor, except the guy in the wheelchair, and we were playing 21, And all of a sudden, the door opened, and the head nurse from the night, the big muchacha, the biggest one in the Navy, come walking in the hospital, and she come walking in, and she says, "What are you doing?" And I stood up, and I saluted her, and I said, "Well, they were very nervous tonight, and we were just getting the edge off." And she said, "Oh, I see." And she looked us over like that, and she said, "Well, carry on." And she walked out of the toilet, and I had been ready to get court-martialed,
Were you playing cards?
Yeah, we were playing 21, with cards. I had gotten a deck of cards from the drawer, and I had brought that in, and we were on the floor. We were It was crazy. Yeah, carry on. It was so. Um, anyways, where was I? Oh, my mind gets wandering
You're
back.
talking about how the men got restless that night.
Oh,
Sleep.
well, we were stationed, and then that was all over with that. And then um, we got a letter or a note on our bulletin board in our quarters, our barracks, well, the apartment building, that was our barracks. And it said that Mrs. Truman, this was just after Roosevelt had died, and President Truman came in as the office as the thing. He said, Mrs. Truman would like some of you girls that would love to come over to the White House and have lunch with her. And we thought it was the guys goofing around because they used to goof around and do stupid things like that. So they said, if you would like to go, would you please sign your name? And everybody looked at everybody and they said, they think I'm going to sign my name. They're crazy. You're fooling around. And I talked to 3 other girls into talk. I said, well, let's fool around and just for the fun of it, put our names down. So we put our names down that we'd like to go to with Mrs. Truman and have lunch. We didn't think anything of it. We thought it was a big joke, And we were waiting for what the guys were going to do when they seen there was names on there. And then all of a sudden we get a call from our captain, and she says, would you come down to my office right away, us that had signed. And we thought, uh-oh, we must have done something we shouldn't have done, So we went down there, and she says, I want you to go up, get into your dress blues, our main uniform, get in your dress blues, and come down as fast as you can, because there's going to be a car here to pick you up. So we all went up, we got our dress blues on, and our caps and the whole thing, And we went down, and we were there about 2 minutes, and this big limousine pulled up, and they got us. They said to get in, and we got in, and then we go, and we go through the gates to the White House, where nobody gets through the gates to the White House. That's a no. We went right through, and we went all the way to the White House, and we went down the stairs, and we went down this long, beautiful hall with carpet and big pictures on the wall. It was really something that was fascinating. And then they stopped at this door, and they opened it up and told us to go in, and we went in, and Mrs. Truman was standing there. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you girls could come and have lunch with me. And she said, it gets pretty boring around here sometimes. Well, for her, because her husband was so busy with the war, And so we were there for a couple hours eating. We had little sandwiches and little cakes and things, and we were eating it. And then the door opened, and Dr. President Truman stuck his neck, and he says, and he asked us if Bess was taking good care of us girls, and how happy her and him are that they're taking women in the service now, and they just wanted to have him. And we said, we were very happy, everything. Mrs. Truman was very nice to us and everything. And he said, well, I got to run now. He says, I got to run now. I'm supposed to be at a meeting, and I'm late as usual, and they're beginning to get mad at me. And he said, so, but if you want anything, just tell Bess, and she'll get them for you right away. And she says, and he says, thanks again for coming, and we're so proud of you. And he left. But that was quite an honor. So, okay, and then later on, we were having a big snowstorm. It was a big, but when you're in the service, you get to your duty station if you have to crawl. That is it, And we always had to cross the river because we were in Arlington and everything was over into Washington, D.C. And the snow was up to our waist. I don't know how we ever got across the bridge. It was terrible. Oh. He said the snow was.
Seems like you would have got across by then.
Yeah, the snow was. It was terrible. We were freezing, and the snow was up to our waist almost. We managed to get across, and we were standing there in Washington, and nothing was in the streets. The streets were empty. We waited, no bus. And then this great big limousine pulled up. It had 2 flags in the front, on the front fender, so I knew it was somebody important because they always had their flags up there. And the car stopped, and the soldier got out. Can't remember what he was, an army or navy or what he was. Anyways, he got out, he walked around, and he says, "Are you girls trying to get to your duty station?" And we said, "Yes, we are." And he says, "Well, if you're waiting for the bus, it's out of luck because they've been canceled because of the storm." So he says, "If you would like us, we would take you to your duty station if you would like us." And I thought, well, there couldn't be any harm in a big limousine like that. I figured the guy was alone. I figured the driver was just alone, you know. And so I said, that'd be nice. And so we went over to get in the back. There was me and 3 other girls. Well, I don't know how it always happened. Every time anything was going on, they'd always push me ahead of them to do everything ahead of them. And so I started to get in. He opened the door, and I started to get into the back. And I brought my head up, and here was Admiral Nimitz, the head of the Navy Department, the biggest guy in the Navy. Him and the president were like that, you know. And my face was about 4 inches away from his. And I was so new in the service, I didn't know if I was supposed to salute in a limousine or not, you know. So I brought it up, but I could only get my hand up, curled around like this, and I saluted him, and he smiled. He smiled at me, and he saluted me back like that, and we talked all the way to our base, and he was so nice, and he asked if we liked the service, and I said, "Oh, I love the Navy. I'm going to spend all my life in it." That's what I was going to do at the time. And I fell in love instead, so I didn't. But anyways, he said, "Well, I love the Navy too." And I said, "Yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life in it." And he said, "Well, I do too. I want to spend the rest of my life in it." Well, now, remember, he was an old man. He must have been in his early 80s.
Oh, was he?
Oh, he was old, yeah, our late 70s. And then he smiled, and they took us all the way to work, which was all the way across Washington, D.C., in another little tiny town. So he says, and well, now, girls, he says, I imagine that the buses will be running by the end of your day, you know. He says, and you get a ride home, yeah. So we thanked him very much, and he was really a nice man. And we went into work, and we worked all day, and he was right. By the time we got to work, and the buses were running again, and snow had stopped. So that was exciting. So I got 2 important people I've seen. I also marched in President Roosevelt's funeral procession when we were taking his body to the train depot where he was going to be shown for a while. And that was before Truman became president. We had the big parade, you know, the Army had a parade, and the Marines had, and the Navy, we waves at it, our big parade too. I still have the picture of it, so I don't know where it is, but I had it. So it was nice, and I didn't mind. I liked Washington D.C. I did. It was a beautiful, beautiful town. Then we went through, you know, I was stationed in the hospital there in Portsmouth, and they were bringing all the bodies, the guys in that had been shot and everything, you know. And then the war was over. That was, you know, toward the end of when the war was. So they send us
How many years were you in the military? Did you re-enlist?
6 years.
6 years? Yeah. Okay. So you enlisted, what, 3 times? You re-enlisted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost. I had gone home. They had sent me home the first leave I'd had in 3 years. I went to Chicago to visit my mom and dad. And And anyways, I was supposed to come back and go down to my office there since she was enlisted me enough for another 3 years. I was staying in, but it was so late when I told her I was staying in. She said, well, "When you come back from your leave, Billy," everybody called me Billy. "Come on down and we'll fill out the papers for your for your third enlistment." So I said, "Okay." So I went home, and I was with my mother there in Chicago, and they were going to listen to the barn dance, which I didn't fill on. When my first leave, I sure said I didn't want to listen to the barn dance. So I went. A friend of mine was the bartender around the corner in an apartment building. It had a little bar in the basement for the people that lived there if they wanted to come down for a beer or something. And this friend of mine, Jeff, he was working as a bartender there. So I went down and there and I was going to just talk to him. So we talked. There wasn't a soul in the place, just him behind the bartender. So we talked and talked for a couple hours. And then the door opened and this gorgeous soldier walked in his uniform with all his medals. And I say, boy, he was handsome.
What was the Army?
Huh?
He was in the Army?
In the Army, yeah. Yeah, my husband was in the Army. And I looked at him and I leaned over the bar to Jeff, my friend, and I says, "I'm going to marry him." And I didn't know him, but he happened to be a friend of Jeff's. They had gone to school together. That's why he was there to say hello to Jeff. And he had just gotten out of the service. And I found out later my husband was he was in the Army, and he was at first he was at an airport where they loaded the bombers to make in England, and he would volunteer to be a waist gunner, so he'd go on the bombing mission, because waist gunners and tail gunners were always killed, because that was the only protection there was in a bomber, was those two. And so they were always if somebody wanted to shoot, get rid of them. And most of the bombers, what was I going to say? Oh, the old age creeping in again.
So the waist gunner.
Yeah, they would get a volunteer to come in as waist gunner or tail gunner. Well, he couldn't be a tail gunner because he was too tall. He was over 6 foot. And so he always volunteered as a waist gunner. And he did that in a lot of bombing missions. And one time he had gone on a bombing mission with them. They had flown the plane over. They were bombing somewhere, some Romania oil fields or something. And coming back, they were skimming over the top of the trees, coming into the airport there in England, where he was stationed. And when they got in, he got out and he was talking to one. Each bomber had their own crew. I mean, permanent crew, So he was talking to one of them, and he says, "Boy, that pilot's a good pilot." And the guy started laughing like mad. And my husband said, "What's so funny?" He says, "Do you know who that pilot is?" And my husband said, "No." It was Jimmy Stewart, the movie star. So my husband said he flew with Jimmy Stewart and he never even had a chance to see him. Because, after a bombing mission, the guys were kept up there and they didn't get out of the plane right away, the pilot and the co-pilot, And the bombardier, those three always stayed up there for sometimes an hour and a half telling people what they'd done and what they'd seen and what they bombed. And so that was exciting. Then he got bored and they were asking for volunteers to volunteer for the Battle of the Bulge, which was going to be a big battle, And my husband was tired of loading bombs and everything, so he volunteered. He was a young man, so they took him and he went and when they landed on the Battle of the Bulge, he was there and he fought in the Battle of the Bulge, which was a pretty bad fight. It was really bad. It was so cold that the ground was frozen, and they used to break their little shovels trying to make a hole so they could crawl into, behind them. So it was a horrible, horrible battle. And then from there, General Patton, who everybody I'm sure remembers General Patton. Yeah, my husband made a movie about him. Anyways, my husband joined General Patton, and he went all the way across the whole thing with General Patton, all his fighting and everything. All of he was a big leader. He was a big general, and till they got to Berlin, and then Eisenhower told Patton that he wasn't allowed to go into Berlin to take Berlin. That was the end of it. And Patton got so mad he was cussing him out. My husband said he was so mad because we were the ones that had fought across to get us there, and they told us we had to wait and let the Russians come in, and the Russians hadn't even been fighting him hardly then. So it was really something. And anyways, Patton was so mad. Now Patton was a terrific general in a battle, So he had his ups and downs. He was the one, remember, that slapped the guy in the hospital because he didn't want to go back to the front. Called him a coward and slapped him in the face. Yeah, it was a boo-boo. So, anyways, that happened there. Yeah.
So you got married to, his name was Frank, right? Frank Nowitzki?
Frank, yeah. Yeah, I went back and I spent the whole week with him. My week of leave that was left, about 5 days left, and we went out every night. And he asked me to marry him, and I went back. I said I have to go back and get out of the Navy. I'm in the Navy.
Yeah.
So I went back and I went down to my captain's, and she said, "I thought you were going to re-enlist." And I said, "I was." I said, "But I went home and I fell in love." And she said, "Oh." Anyways, she put me down for not being in anymore.
So that was the beginning of a new story, huh?
Yeah, so that was the beginning.
When you were in the military, what did you girls do for entertainment on your days off? When you had days off in the military,
We didn't have many days off.
Did you go dancing? Did you go walking? Did you go to the beach?
Well, the one base, the one in San Diego.
Yeah.
I went to San Diego after the war was over, and I was put in the Department of Labor and Delivery. So I helped women that were going to have babies and helped the doctor deliver them. So that was pretty nice. But it was so crowded because the war was over. The sailors were coming home.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, we had all these women coming in pregnant. She said, all these wives, they all got pregnant and then their husband.
Baby boom, huh?
And I worked in labor and delivery there. One time I was working the night shift, and we were supposed to, if somebody come in that was in labor, we were supposed to clean them up and put them in the shuttle, with their feet up and everything, and then go down 2 doors, and that was where the doctor would sleep, and we would wake him up and tell him we have a delivery, and he would come over and deliver the baby. This woman come in and she was already crowning. She was going to have it soon, so I put her up in this, what do you call them, the stirrups, and please excuse my memory, it's getting bad. Like I said, I'm getting old. And anyways, I ran down to get the doctor. I said, "You better come quick because this one isn't going to take very long." He said, "Okay, I'll be right there." I said, I went back and I was trying to hold the baby in, and I finally ran and told the doctor, "You better come down if we haven't." And he said, "Oh, I'll be there." And he still didn't come down. So the baby was coming, so I delivered it. I delivered the baby, and we had a doctor. They had a trial, see what happened, why I delivered the baby, because I wasn't supposed to.
Oh.
And so everything was, was told to them. And they said it wasn't my fault, and I done exceptionally good for what I did, and they gave me a commendation for delivering the baby, and they sent him to Okinawa. They always send everybody that they got in trouble in the Navy to Okinawa.
We're gonna go back to when you worked in the hospital and the war was still active and everything. And did any of the men try? Did they fall for you? Did they try to want to go to get
Sure.
close to you or go on a date with you or?
Well, we didn't date.
I mean, you know how sometimes
no
things like that happen.
A lot of them, yeah.
A lot of them did, huh?
Yeah, well, I was cute.
Yeah.
I was a cute little kitty. No, I admit it, I was kind of cute.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, here you're coming along and you're helping them, and yeah.
If they had to have it,
Yeah.
if they had, what's it called? Yeah.
Oh.
If they had to have one, we had to call a mail corps.
Oh.
And he would come in and take care of that. So, and the guys loved us.
Yeah.
I mean, they loved us. And when we went, we had to give them all a back rub when they went to bed at night.
Yeah.
It was supposed to relax them.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a lot of men to give back rubs to.
40, you try it. It's a lot of guys to give, yeah. And so that was great.
Did you ever see any of these men sent back to the lines again, back to war, or
yeah,
most of them
sure.
was at home?
Oh, sure. When they were well enough to go back, every one of them, especially the Navy, would hope their ship was in port. Because if their ship was in port, when they got out of the hospital, they could go back onto their own ship. If not, they would put on the next ship that come in.
Yeah.
So they all like to get back on their own ship with their own friends, Well, no, we sent a lot of them back, and a lot of them weren't killed. They were injured, and it was a very rough time.
Anything else you want to say before I stop this?
Yeah, when I got out of the service, you're still in active duty in the Navy for 5 or 6 months, whatever it was, I can't remember, before you're legally discharged. So when I come back from my honeymoon with my husband, I had my letter from the Navy saying I was finally discharged. So I was still in the Navy a little bit.
Did you take it hard? I mean, did you cry because you really kind of wanted to stay?
I asked my husband later. I said, "What would have done if I had gone back and gotten,
you could have been married and still went back."
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't know that. See, I thought that would be finished for me. And I said, I said, "What would you have done if I had already joined the Navy before I went home and leave and met you?" And he said, "Well, I guess I would have been a camp follower." So he said he would have followed me around,
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I always kicked myself because I should have stayed in. My girlfriend stayed in. With me and my girlfriend, we're going to both stay in.
And she never got married, did she?
No, she stayed in for 28 years.
Wow.
She got the first woman to get a medal in the Navy. And she made 48 trips across the Atlantic as a corpsman aboard a troop ship with 2,000 soldiers on it. They had them laying up on deck and down and everywhere there was soldiers laying. And she made 38 trips across as a corpsman on the ship. She done everything I wanted to do. She done everything I wanted to do. But I didn't do it because I got out of the service. I told my husband once, "I don't think you were worth it." He laughed like mad.
Gee, I wish I was back in the Navy. The Navy is the place I want to be.